Hey everyone. So I want to just briefly talk about how I use Claude Code for debugging. So everybody is talking about code generation and showing off how they manage to build amazing apps in no time, but that's not really the task that we want to get rid of as software engineers. The most tedious task we have is debugging and finding small issues. And I have a project that I'm working on where I have some small issues, and I thought let's try to do a live session and see if we can debug that together using Claude Code. So if I go to my terminal here, I'm working on a project called Rush. And so Rush is a deployment and development tool that I've been working on. And I figured out that there is an issue. So if I switch over here to the code editor, then a normal spec file for this stack. You see I have build type here and it just specifies a build type, but there are no subcategories. But then I asked it yesterday to write a extension to this that allowed me to deploy local services. So it wrote this example. But now if you look at the spec file here, it now nests things deeply, and I don't want that. So we need to change that so that it gets flattened. Now this is a relatively huge code base, so a lot of times I would expect I would expect Claude and similar tools to not work very well. Now the solution to this I found is to specify very clearly what is it we want from Claude. And so the very first thing we want is basically just that it does an analysis. And so if I were to get Claude to fix something like this, I would write something like this. Actually, I think I'm going to get it to write 2 documents. Okay, so what I've what I've done here is I've told it this is what I see in the code or what I've seen in the code base. And then I'm asking it to carefully go through the code and try to work out where these differences arise from. And finally, once it's done that, it should just write out two documents with all of the with the spec of what the correct behavior should be and with a issue that explains what is the actual issue here. And so I know we could do Shift Tab to go into planning mode. I don't want to do that because I want to show how this works. Even though we're in coding mode, it should still just produce these 2 documents, and normally it shouldn't touch any of the code that we're working on. And so the whole idea here is to get it to write out a plan and a spec for what our software should look like before we go ahead and ask it to fix it. This will help make things a lot more solid in the way we're doing things. So you see here, the plan becomes now to analyze the code, and once it's analyzed it, it'll write out these files. But there's no steps in the to-dos about actually fixing the issue, which is exactly what we want. We want to have these files so we can review them and understand what is the issue. And then once we understand these things, we want to then ask it to fix it. Okay, so it is writing the spec file now, and we can have a look at that and just check that that's actually what we want to have. So stack spec.yaml, defines the component of a Rust product. Each component represents a service, application, or infrastructure element that Rust will build, deploy, and manage. Each product must have a stack to spec, blah, blah. Yeah, this is correct. This is also correct. Also correct. Correct. Let's see. Ingress. Some good examples. Rebuild Docker image. Local service. Okay. So this is exactly what we wanted to have. So local service, Postgres, required service, optional. Docker image. Persist data. Is that really required? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Yeah, it probably is. I would want to do that. Volumes. That seems like a bit of discrepancy, right? On one line up here, we have persist data, and on the other one, we are specifying the actual data here on the data persistence. We might want to have Claude to review this and just have an extra think about whether this is actually what we want. Init SQL, yeah, maybe that's nice to have. Depends on, that's what we have for the other ones. Actually, maybe we don't need that for services. K8s only, monitoring. That's K8s install, common fields, right, do, native, so on and so forth. That looks good. Okay, that looks good. And then we have the issues folder here. So there's a problem, this is critical misalignment, and the actual implementation in Rust. It uses build type field that is incompatible with the current. Oh, this is actually super nice. Maybe this should be the way that we start creating actual issues. It's really clear what the issue is here, right? And there's so much more text than if I'd written an issue in GitHub or whatever. So this is actually, you can pick this up and understand what is the problem here and what should it be, right? This is super nice. I like this. The root course, and there is a ton of stuff in here that would help us really estimating the size of this ticket. Example is non-functional. Okay, so need to fix that one. So local service passing needs to be fixed. Oh, so and it does write out quite a lot of code. Update all examples. Yeah, that makes sense. And this is actually true. The priority is pretty high on this one because without this, like this is not something that you could ship because the core spec is not fulfilled, right? So if I would ship this and start using it, then I would end up with a bunch of products that are using the wrong spec, and then the next roll up where I'm fixing this, it would completely break everything. So I would agree with the priority here. And then the estimated effort, yeah, maybe if I had to do it myself, maybe it would be 4 hours, but I'm not going to do this myself. So, okay. But let's just get back to the spec and then have a look here, right? Because we had some minor things here, like we don't want people to be able to specify volumes for the local services. Also image, I think that should be, oh wait, yeah. I think image, that should probably be version instead. Okay. Okay, so the small discrepancies that we found, we're just asking it to update that in the spec file, and with a clear spec, a clear issue text, we're going to ask Claude to fix the issues in just a second. Okay, let's have a look. So local service Postgres. Oh, but we forgot to tell it to add a versions field, right? We still want to be able to specify the version. I mean, in theory, we could add that into the service type, but it feels like it would be cleaner to add it as a separate field. Also, ports shouldn't be there. Version 15, okay. Maybe ports should be there, right? Because the ports might be... That's a good question. Do we actually want ports there? That's a good question. I think my answer is yes for now. It doesn't feel quite right. It feels very Docker likely. But on the other hand, even if you would start a local service like Postgres locally without Docker, you'd still need a port. Right, and so the possibility to customly override, that makes sense to me. Init script, health check, yeah. Makes sense. But that should be an environment variable. Yeah. No, so definitely port must be an environment variable. Okay, but this is now it's added another hallucination. This is actually not true. The point of local service is that it may be running locally or it may be running in Docker, whatever the implementation states. But it is not for the user to decide this. This is just decided by Rush. It's meant to make life easy. Okay, so Yeah, so I think this is the last edit. Right. So I guess we are ending up spending a lot of time getting the specs right here. And initially, we just wanted to identify the issue. So what I hopefully have shown you is that it's super easy to get Claude to actually identify the issue. And then at the same time, you get to see what is going wrong in your specification and make that better. And if you're stringent about specking out everything you're doing, you'll make thoughts or any AI tools life a lot easier, and your own life a lot easier, because it will be very, very clear what the requirements are for something to actually be working the way that you want it to be working. Okay, let's have a look now. This is a managed service. Executable. Yes, okay, this is great. So this is the spec that we want. I wonder if it still remembers the issue. Let's just be sure to give it the full file name. I mean, it should be remembering the issue, but just to be sure. You also notice that this approach actually goes very well hand in hand with some of the other approaches we've been discussing, like test-driven development, mapping out your project requirements, and all of this. And this is the new way of working, making sure that you are always specking out things and doing a proper work to have specs, have tests well defined, and have acceptance criteria well defined. So it's very clear what's the task at hand. At least for me, this is exactly the thing that has made that AI has gone from being a liability to actually being pretty useful. And so I'm just going to accept everything it proposes. We'll review the changes in just a bit and clean it up nicely. Okay, cool. Let's have a look at what it has actually done. As usual, there is a ton of garbage that shouldn't be there. Like, for instance, this test local services. I have no idea why we would have that there. The same for this one. Would have expected it to write that out as a proper test. Let's see. So it's updated this one. This is now nice and flat. Okay. Let's just get it to fix this. This is one of the things. It's a little bit surprising that you have to tell it this. I would have expected that it just knows that the proper way of doing things would be to add unit tests and not just pollute the directory with all sorts of garbage. Let's see what it's coming up with. Oh no, it's vibe coding. Cool. So now we saw. No, we didn't. What we see here, it creates a test now. It adds a spec for what a service might look like. And then it gets so it gets the component spec from the YAML, and then we just check that it's giving exactly what we want to have. I wonder, does that gives you that environment? It also service type, Postgres. What about the build type itself? Yeah, okay, so all of these things are moved nicely into the build type, so this test makes sense to me. And it has quite a lot of different tests here. Okay, so let's have a look what happened. It still left the garbage down here, so let's just delete that manually because we don't want that checked into the repository. Other than that, let's try to run the test and see that tests are passing. Okay, so last thing to do is simply just to do a little bit of cleanup. We don't need to check the issue in because that one is already solved. And I think that is pretty much it. We've done what we set out to do. So we identified an issue. We asked Claude to do the whole analysis for us and figure out where the actual issue was, what files to change, what was the scope of the issue. It did that really well. Then we used that as an opportunity to create a spec for that part of the system and make sure that we have a very clear specification for how do we expect that the spec files in Rush to actually work. And we did that as well, which means that we now have a lot of context we can use the next time we're using Claude. And this will help Claude produce better code when we are doing more refactors. I hope this has been useful. If it has been useful, like and subscribe, and also leave your comments. I'm really curious if you have something that you think is a great tip for how to use Claude or any other coding system. I would love to hear about that in the comments. All right, see you next time.